They said my daughter couldn't fly first class because she looked homeless. The attendant said it in front of everyone, loud enough for the people in line behind us to hear. My daughter's face crumbled. She tried to hold it together, but I saw the tears hit her sneakers. I opened my mouth to defend her, but the attendant cut me off. He waved over security and said we needed to step aside. My heart was pounding. I felt humiliated, furious, helpless. Then, just as they started to escort us away, a man in a suit walked up, pulled out a card, and said 5 words that made the entire terminal go silent. "She's with me." Everyone froze. Even the attendant backed away. That moment changed everything. My name is Raina Quinn, and I've always believed in keeping promises, especially the ones I make to my daughter. Lyra turned 15 last month. She's my only child, my heartbeat, and the strongest person I know. But lately, life had been hitting her harder than most kids her age. Last year, Lyra started high school, and everything changed. She used to be outgoing, creative, loud in the best way. But high school has a way of narrowing the world, of squeezing kids into categories. Lyra didn't fit any of them. She liked oversized sweaters and ripped jeans, old band t-shirts, boots scuffed at the toes. She never cared about looking like everyone else, and I admired that. But some kids saw her as a target. She got called names: weird, homeless, trashy. Teachers said nothing. Friends slowly stopped inviting her over. I watched her fade into herself, pulling her hood up, avoiding mirrors, and pretending it didn't hurt. So when I scraped together enough for a little getaway, I knew it had to be something special. We'd never flown first class before, not even close, but this time I saved for it. I wanted Lyra to feel seen, important, celebrated. It wasn't just a trip. It was a gift for surviving a year that nearly broke her. I didn't tell her until the day we left. She walked into the kitchen and found 2 suitcases packed and sitting by the door. I told her we were going to New York for the weekend. Her eyes lit up in that way I hadn't seen in months. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Really? Just us?" We got to the airport early. She was nervous, but I could tell she was trying to pretend she wasn't. She had put together an outfit she loved. She wore her favorite denim jacket with patches she had sewn on herself, a big hoodie underneath, and cargo pants. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun with a pencil stuck through it, something she always did when she was sketching. She looked like herself. While we were waiting to check our bags, I noticed a few people glance in our direction. One woman gave us a quick up and down and then turned to her husband, whispering something under her breath. I ignored it. People judge. That's on them. We weren't there for them. We were going to have fun. At the gate, I handed our tickets to Lyra and told her to read the seat numbers. When she saw 1A and 1B, her eyes went wide. Wait, first class? You got us first class? I nodded and smiled. Happy birthday, baby. She grinned, really grinned. The kind of grin that lights up a whole face, the kind I hadn't seen in almost a year. She laughed and said, "I feel like royalty." And for a moment she did. But when we walked toward the first-class boarding lane, everything shifted. A young man in a blue airline uniform stepped in front of us. He had a forced, polite smile and tired eyes. He looked at Lyra, then at me, then back at Lyra. "Excuse me," he said. "This lane is for first class." I smiled and handed him our boarding passes. "We're first class." He scanned them, then hesitated. His eyes flicked over Lyra again. I saw his expression shift. His jaw tightened. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "your daughter's attire doesn't meet our premium cabin standards." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He lowered his voice slightly, but not enough. People around us were watching now. "She doesn't appear to be dressed appropriately. We have standards in first class, and, well, she looks—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I saw it in his eyes. I knew exactly what he meant. Lyra froze beside me. Her smile disappeared. Her hands clenched around the handle of her backpack. She stared at the ground. I stepped forward. "Are you serious right now?" He sighed, glancing toward a nearby security guard. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside so we can resolve this." Everything that was supposed to be magical about this trip, the surprise, the joy, the pride, was instantly tainted. My daughter, who had already spent the past year trying to shrink herself just to survive, was being judged by a stranger in front of a crowd. She didn't say a word. But I saw the tears building. She was trying so hard not to cry. In that moment, I wanted to scream. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from every glare, every whisper, every insult, disguised as policy. But all I could do was hold her hand, while someone in a uniform told us we didn't belong. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. We had the right tickets. We were on time. We followed every rule. So why was this man acting like we had no business being there? The gate attendant gestured again. "Ma'am, please, if you'll just step aside, we can clear this up." His voice was calm but condescending, like he was used to people not arguing. He didn't expect a scene. He expected me to quietly take my daughter, walk back to economy, and disappear. But I wasn't going anywhere. I looked down at Lyra. Her head was bowed, her shoulders hunched, her cheeks blotchy with silent tears. She looked small, broken. Not because of what she was wearing, but because someone had looked at her and decided she wasn't worthy of respect, not even a second glance. Just judgment and rejection. My voice was shaking, but I stood straighter. "This is my daughter. She is flying first class. We both are. Check your screen again." The attendant sighed and tapped at his tablet, but I could tell he wasn't looking for anything. He had already made up his mind. He leaned closer and said, "Ma'am, I'm not saying she's not allowed on the flight. I'm saying she's not dressed for the premium cabin. We have certain standards. She's wearing clean clothes. She's covered head to toe. She's dressed comfortably for a flight. What exactly is the problem?" He paused. That moment told me everything. He didn't have a real answer, just an opinion he thought would go unchallenged. Lyra tugged on my sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, it's okay. Can we just go? I don't want to be here anymore." Her eyes met mine. She was humiliated. Not angry, not defiant, just tired. Tired of being made to feel like she had to apologize for who she was. That look cut through me. It made my stomach twist in a way I can't describe. "No," I said, loud enough for everyone in the gate area to hear. "It's not okay." People had started to notice. A couple standing nearby with designer carry-ons stopped their conversation and stared. An older man 2 rows back tilted his head, listening. Someone further back pulled out their phone. I knew what this looked like. A woman arguing with staff, a kid crying. People love drama at airports. The gate attendant glanced behind him and waved toward the security desk. A uniformed guard began walking toward us. I stepped in front of Lyra. I could feel her trembling behind me. "This is harassment," I said firmly. "My daughter hasn't broken any rules. You are singling her out based on what? Her outfit? You don't get to decide who looks rich enough to sit in first class." The attendant didn't respond. He stood stiffly, eyes flicking toward the approaching guard. Lyra tugged my arm again. "Mom, please stop. Everyone's looking. I just want to go home." I turned and knelt in front of her. "Look at me. You didn't do anything wrong. Do you hear me? You belong here." She didn't answer. She looked away, her face hot with shame. And then the guard reached us. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice flat, almost bored. The attendant jumped in. "Yes, I was asking these passengers to move aside. We're trying to sort out a ticket issue." "No," I said quickly, rising to my feet. "There's no ticket issue. We have first-class seats. He just doesn't like how my daughter looks." The guard looked between us, then at the boarding passes in the attendant's hand. "She has a valid seat?" he asked. The attendant hesitated again, then muttered, "Yes, but..." "But what?" I asked, voice rising. Lyra covered her face with both hands. I saw her shoulders shake. She was crying now, trying to hide it. The guard sighed. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me for a minute. Let's step over here and talk." I stood there, frozen. If I moved, it would feel like giving up, like I was agreeing that my daughter didn't belong where she was. I looked around. Dozens of people watching. No one speaking. No one helping. And then I heard a voice behind us, calm and clear. "She's with me." The room seemed to pause. The guard turned. The attendant's mouth fell open slightly. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, holding out a silver card. His expression was unreadable. He looked at the attendant, then at Lyra. I said, "She's with me." That's when everything shifted. The man's voice cut through everything. Not loud, not angry, just calm, certain. It was the kind of voice that made people stop and listen. "She's with me." The security guard stepped back slightly. The gate attendant froze. I turned to look at the man who had spoken. He was tall, in his late 40s maybe, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit with a silver tie. His shoes looked expensive, but not flashy. He had an airline badge clipped to his jacket pocket and a polished demeanor that made it clear he belonged in a place of authority. He held out a sleek silver card. The attendant took one look at it and his entire posture changed. "Oh, of course, I'm sorry, sir," the attendant stammered. "I didn't realize—" The man didn't even glance at him. He looked directly at me, then at Lyra. He stepped forward and knelt slightly, so he was eye level with her. "Hey," he said gently, "that shouldn't have happened to you. Come on, let's get you to your seat." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes red and glassy. She didn't know what to say. Neither did I. The man stood and turned to the gate attendant. "Please process their boarding immediately," he said, voice firm, "and make a note. There's no dress code in this airline's premium cabins that overrides basic respect." The attendant's face turned pale. "Yes, sir." He motioned for us to follow him. The crowd had gone silent, watching as we walked toward the jet bridge. My hand found Lyra's. She squeezed it hard, still shaking. I looked over at her and saw confusion in her eyes. She couldn't understand why this stranger had stepped in. Honestly, neither could I. We boarded the plane through the first-class entrance. The flight attendant smiled at the man and gave him a slight nod of recognition, then greeted us like royalty. Once we were seated, row 1, plush-wide seats, champagne being offered, hot towels passed around. The man stood nearby, hands in his pockets. I found my voice. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." He smiled. "Mason Jett." I blinked. I had heard that name before. "You work for the airline?" "I do," he said with a small nod. "Executive Vice President. I oversee passenger experience, among other things." My stomach flipped. This wasn't just some frequent flyer with status. He was a decision maker, the kind of person who could rewrite policy, the kind of person whose presence instantly changed the rules. "I don't understand," I said. "Why did you step in? You didn't know us." He looked over at Lyra. She was sitting quietly, curled into herself, trying to disappear into the oversized seat. "Because I used to be her," he said simply. "Not exactly, of course. But I know what it feels like to be judged before you even speak. When I was a teenager, I looked different too. I didn't have nice clothes. I worked to pay for my textbooks, and more than once, I was told I didn't belong somewhere because of how I looked." I sat in silence, absorbing every word. "One day," he continued, "a woman stood up for me in a courtroom. I had been summoned for something ridiculous, a dispute over a parking violation I couldn't afford to pay. She didn't know me, but she stood up and vouched for me. She said I deserved a chance, that I was more than what people assumed. I never forgot it." He looked back toward the aisle where the gate attendant had now boarded and was nervously checking the overhead bins. "I made a promise to myself," he said. "If I ever had the chance to be that person for someone else, I'd take it." Lyra finally spoke, her voice so soft it almost disappeared under the hum of the cabin. "Thank you." Mason turned to her and smiled. "You didn't need me to be here to belong, but I'm glad I was." He checked his watch, gave us both a nod, and stepped into the galley to speak with the flight crew. Lyra leaned into me, her head against my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her and let myself breathe for the first time since we entered the airport. She whispered, "I didn't do anything wrong, did I?" "No, baby, you didn't." For the first time in hours, she believed me. The plane lifted into the air with a smooth, quiet grace. Lyra sat next to the window, knees drawn up, head leaning lightly against the glass. Her body was still tense, but her eyes were steady now. She stared out over the clouds, her reflection faint in the window. I didn't interrupt her. I just let her breathe. A flight attendant came by with drinks and offered Lyra a warm cookie and sparkling water. She thanked her with a shy smile, the first real one since we entered the airport that morning. The air inside the cabin felt different now, softer somehow. The humiliation she'd felt just hours ago still hovered, but something had shifted. She wasn't hiding anymore. Not completely. Mason Jett sat across the aisle. He had returned to his seat after speaking with the crew and now glanced over and gave Lyra a quiet thumbs up. She returned a tiny nod. I leaned closer to her. "You know who he is, right?" She shook her head. "Kind of. You said he works for the airline? He's not just someone who works there. He helps run the entire company. People don't tell him no. They answer to him." Lyra blinked. Why would someone like that care about me? I reached for her hand and gave it a light squeeze. Because he saw you, really saw you, and he remembered what it feels like not to be seen at all. She looked down at her lap and ran her fingers along one of the stitched patches on her jeans. "I didn't think anyone saw me like that." I was about to respond when Mason stood and stepped into the aisle. He walked over and asked if he could sit next to us for a moment. I nodded. Lyra pulled her legs down and sat up straighter, unsure of what to expect. Mason looked at her kindly. "I didn't mean to embarrass you earlier. I know that kind of attention can feel like a spotlight you don't want." Lyra nodded slowly. "I'm not used to people standing up for me." "Well, let me be the first of many," he said. "What's your name?" "Lyra." "Beautiful name," he said. "I meant what I said out there. You didn't do anything wrong. You walked into that gate like you belonged, because you did. And when someone tried to make you feel small, you didn't run. That kind of strength? That's rare." She stayed quiet, but I could see how much his words meant. Her hand stopped fidgeting. Her breathing slowed. "I don't want to overstep," he said, turning slightly toward me, "but I'd like to do something for Lyra. If it's okay with you?" I hesitated. "You already did more than I could have imagined." He shook his head. "I want to go further. The airline sponsors a youth mentorship program, creative fields, entrepreneurship, social impact work. We pair teens with professionals who can help nurture their ideas. We offer support, exposure, and funding for projects that matter." Lyra looked up. "Like art?" "Exactly like art," he said. "I saw your jacket. Those patches, did you design them yourself?" She nodded. "I draw all the time. I like turning my drawings into patches, stickers, prints. I don't show them to many people, though." Mason smiled. "You should. The world needs more people like you creating things that don't look like everything else." Lyra glanced at me. I smiled and nodded. "You should do it, baby." Mason reached into his jacket and handed her a sleek black business card. "Take this. No pressure. You can call or email whenever you're ready. No deadlines. Just an open door." She took it with both hands like it was something precious. "Thank you," she whispered. Mason stood. "You don't owe me anything. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When someone tries to shrink you again, don't let them. You've got more power than you realize." He stepped away and returned to his seat as the flight attendants began preparing for landing. Lyra sat still for a while, holding the card in her lap, then tucked it carefully into the small sketchbook she always carried in her backpack. When we landed, the same gate attendant stood by the door, avoiding eye contact. Mason didn't speak to him again. He didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been done. As we stepped off the plane, Lyra turned to me and said, "I think I want to show people my art, not just hide it." I smiled. "Then that's exactly what you'll do." The moment she said it, I knew something had changed. She didn't just survive that day, she claimed it. We left the airport without saying another word to the staff. There was nothing left to prove. We had our seats. We had our dignity. And we had something more powerful than either of those things. A memory neither of us would forget. That night, after we checked into our hotel, Lyra curled up by the window overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered in the distance. She opened her sketchbook and flipped to a blank page. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there, pencil in hand, eyes focused. Then she looked up. "Do you think people will ever stop judging others like that?" I sat across from her on the edge of the bed. "Maybe not all at once, but I think some people are trying. And I think what Mason did today helps. What you're doing right now helps." She glanced down at her drawing, then gave a small smile. "I think I want to make something from this, like a design. Not just about what happened at the airport, but about being seen, about being taken seriously without having to change." I could hear the strength returning to her voice. It wasn't just an idea, it was a decision. When we got home a few days later, Lyra asked me to help her scan some of her drawings into the computer. She wanted to turn them into digital patches and prints. I watched her work for hours, completely focused, her creativity pouring out like it had been waiting for permission. She posted a few designs online. At first, she didn't expect much, but then people started sharing them. A local art program reached out, then a youth gallery, then a community blog did a short feature on her story. She called the collection Belonging. Her tagline was simple: "You don't have to match the room to deserve your seat in it." One afternoon, a package arrived addressed to her. Inside was a letter on premium airline stationery. It was from Mason. He wrote, "Lyra, thank you for reminding me why I do what I do. Your courage and voice are more powerful than you know. I've shared your story, with your permission, of course, with our internal teams, and we've started reviewing the ways we train staff to recognize unconscious bias. Change takes time, but it starts with stories like yours. Stay bold." He enclosed a framed photo from the trip. The two of us in our first-class seats, Lyra holding her sketchbook in her lap, sunlight coming through the window. On the back, he had written, "Some flights change more than your location." That photo sits on Lyra's desk now, next to her art supplies, her laptop, and a small notebook full of new design ideas. She still wears her favorite jacket, still wears her style like armor and art, but something's different. She walks taller. She speaks louder. She no longer apologizes for being herself. And I've changed, too. I used to think my job as a mother was just to protect her. But it's more than that. It's about standing beside her when she faces the world and making sure she sees her worth, especially when others try to take it away. What happened that day at the airport could have broken her spirit. Instead, it became the beginning of something powerful. Not because of the airline, not even because of Mason, but because she chose to turn shame into expression, hurt into purpose. I learned that sometimes one voice can change everything. Mason didn't have to speak. He could have walked past, but he didn't. And because he acted, my daughter saw what it looks like when people use power for good. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: don't underestimate the impact of standing up. When you see someone being diminished, speak. When you hear someone being dismissed, intervene. You don't need a badge or a title to make a difference. Sometimes the simple act of saying, "She's with me," is enough to change the entire direction of someone's life. Lyra's story is still being written, but I know this for certain. She'll never forget the day someone looked at her and didn't see a problem to correct, but a person to protect. And neither will I. If this story moved you or made you think twice about how we treat others, do something with that feeling. Speak up. Show up. Choose kindness even when it's inconvenient. And if you've ever been judged for how you look, how you speak, or simply for being different, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are enough. You belong. If you connected with Lyra's story, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment telling us what it made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. And if you want more real stories like this, raw, human, and honest, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Thanks for watching, and remember, when someone tries to shrink your light, shine harder. At my son's funeral, my aunt leaned in so close I could smell her lavender perfume. She whispered, "God took the wrong child." I didn't react. I couldn't. Then her daughter, my cousin Brielle, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "His brother was always the good one." And that was it. My knees buckled. I dropped onto the pew like my spine had turned to glass and someone just shattered it. I couldn't breathe. My whole body shook, and I couldn't hold the sobs back anymore. It wasn't just grief. It was something else. Deeper. Dirtier. I felt ashamed, as if I'd failed, as if Elias, my beautiful boy, had died, and somehow it was a punishment. People looked away. Some watched, but no one moved. No one said anything. I was the mother of the boy in the casket, and I was sobbing in front of all of them, but no one came to hold me. And then, out of nowhere, a man I'd never seen before, tall, quiet, in a black coat, stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He just reached out and handed me something, a folded piece of paper. I stared at it, confused, still crying. He didn't wait. He walked away before I could ask him who he was or why he was there. I looked down at the note. My hands were shaking. I unfolded it, barely able to see through my tears. It said, "Your son pushed his brother out of the car's path." I froze. The entire church seemed to go silent, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I read it again. My son. The one they said should have died was the one who gave his life to save his brother. Suddenly, the things they whispered didn't matter, because now I knew the truth, and everything was about to change. I was never supposed to be a single mom, at least not in the beginning. When Elias was born, his father swore we were going to build a life together, but by the time Jonah came 2 years later, that dream had already cracked and crumbled. I was 27, standing in the middle of our small North Carolina apartment with 2 babies, no college degree, and a man who never came back from a quick run to the store. It was always just the 3 of us after that, me, Elias, and Jonah. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked nights at a diner and cleaned offices on weekends. I missed school plays, field trips, even a few birthdays. I hated it, but I did it so the lights would stay on and their shoes would fit come fall. I loved my boys more than anything in the world, even when the world seemed to forget we existed. Elias was the quiet one. He'd read books meant for adults by the time he was 9. He always asked if I needed help, and when he hugged me, it felt like he meant it with his whole body. Sensitive, thoughtful, always watching, always listening. He was the kind of kid who would sit with the new student at lunch or stop and help an older neighbor carry groceries in the rain. He never needed attention. He just wanted to do the right thing. Jonah was different. Loud, bright, funny. He had this crooked grin that made people forgive him even before he apologized. He got in trouble at school for talking too much, interrupting, making jokes during math. He'd get grounded and charm his way out of it an hour later. Teachers liked him. So did the neighbors, our family, even strangers. He was magnetic, and he knew it. People always had something to say about the difference between them. I remember my Aunt Marlene once joked at Thanksgiving, "Well, if you ever had to choose one, we all know who the crowd favorite is." She laughed like it was harmless, like Elias wouldn't hear. But he was sitting right there, pretending not to care, biting his thumbnail the way he always did when he was trying not to cry. I hated when people compared them. I hated that they acted like Jonah's shine made Elias dull. They were both good boys, just in different ways. Jonah was the spark. Elias was the warmth that stayed long after the fire burned down. Still, even I started to notice the pattern. Jonah got praise. Elias got overlooked. At church, people asked how Jonah's basketball games were going, but never mentioned Elias's science fair trophies. When Jonah made a joke, the room lit up. When Elias made a point, people nodded politely and moved on. I tried to balance it. I made sure Elias had just as many hugs, just as many bedtime stories. I told him he was special, that being kind was better than being cool, that I saw him. But I always wondered if it was enough, if I could ever give him what the rest of the world wouldn't. The morning of the accident started like any other. I made them waffles, even though we were running late. Elias offered to wash the dishes before we left. Jonah teased him, said we'd be late, and called him Mom's little butler. Elias just smiled and rinsed the plates. That was who he was. He did the right thing even when no one clapped for it. I dropped them off at school and headed to my shift at the diner. Around 3:15, my phone rang. The number said unknown, but I picked it up anyway. A shaky voice said my name. Then the words, "I'll never forget. There's been an accident. 1 son injured, 1 son gone." They wouldn't tell me which one on the phone. That ride to the hospital felt like someone had set time on fire. I was frozen and boiling at the same time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept whispering their names, hoping saying them out loud would keep them alive. Jonah, Elias, Jonah, Elias. When I arrived, they told me, Jonah had a broken arm, a concussion, but he was alive. Elias didn't make it. The world stopped. I didn't scream. I didn't fall. I just sat there in that white hallway staring at the floor tiles, thinking about how Elias always walked between Jonah and the road just in case. That was who he was. Even then, I didn't know the full truth. That would come later, at the funeral, with a note and a stranger. But in that moment, all I knew was that my heart had been torn in two, and the quiet one, the one the world barely noticed, was gone. The funeral was held 3 days later. I don't remember deciding on anything. People made choices for me: casket color, flowers, music. I just nodded. I moved like a ghost in my own life. My sister picked out the suit Elias would wear. It was too big. He had just turned 16 and was still growing into himself. The suit made him look older than he was. Too still, too quiet, and I hated it. The church filled quickly that morning. Family came. Neighbors, classmates, teachers, people I hadn't spoken to in years showed up to hug me and say they were sorry. Some meant it. Some just wanted to be seen. I sat in the front row, next to Jonah, whose arm was still in a sling. He hadn't said much since the accident. He stared at the floor like he was waiting to fall through it. I wanted to comfort him, to hold him, but I couldn't even hold myself together. The priest spoke softly. The choir sang a hymn Elias used to hum while doing his homework. That's when it hit me. He wasn't coming home. There would be no more humming, no more quiet footsteps past my bedroom door, no more questions about life or books or the stars. He was gone. After the second hymn, people were asked to speak. A few teachers shared memories. One said Elias was the most polite student she ever taught. Another mentioned how he stayed after class to help clean up, even when he didn't have to. It made me proud, but it also made the ache worse. Why did he have to be the one? Then Aunt Marlene stood up. She wore black pearls and a matching hat, like she was attending a gala. Her voice was slow, measured, like she was reading from a script. She said she was sorry for my loss, said we should cherish the child we still had. I should have felt comforted. I didn't. After the service, people moved outside to the churchyard for the burial. The wind picked up. Leaves rustled. I stood at the graveside clutching Jonah's hand. Then I felt a hand on my back. Aunt Marlene leaned in, far too close. Her voice was low and sharp. "God took the wrong child," she said. I blinked. I thought I misheard. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Before I could respond, her daughter, Brielle, my 17-year-old cousin, stepped beside her. She looked at Jonah, then back at me. "His brother was always the good one," she said. I felt my stomach twist. My breath caught. I let go of Jonah's hand. My knees gave out, and I hit the damp grass like it had pulled me under. I didn't cry softly. I wailed. My chest shook. My hands clawed at the air. It wasn't just grief. It was humiliation, shame, anger. Those words wrapped around my neck like a rope. People turned to look. Some stepped back. No one came forward. They didn't understand. My son had just been buried, and I was being told, out loud, in public, that it should have been the other one, that Elias wasn't good enough to live, that the world had made a mistake. I looked at Jonah. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He heard them too. I saw it in the way he pulled his arm back, like he wanted to disappear into the ground. And in that moment, I felt guilt tear through me. Had I done this? Had I let the world treat Elias like a shadow for so long that even his death felt like a footnote? The whispers around us grew louder. Someone behind me murmured, "Jonah has always been the bright one." Another added, "Such a shame it wasn't the other way around." My grief twisted into something darker. I wanted to scream, to defend Elias, to tell every single person there who he was and what he meant. But the words wouldn't come. I stood up slowly, still trembling, dirt on my knees. I couldn't look at anyone. My heart was breaking all over again, not just because he was gone, but because the world had already moved on from him. I turned to leave. I needed air. I needed silence. I needed something, anything, that felt real. That's when I saw him. A tall man in a black coat standing near the edge of the crowd. He was watching me, but not with pity, with purpose. He stepped forward, reached out, and placed a folded note into my hand. "You should know the truth," he said quietly. He was brave. And then he walked away. I didn't even have time to ask who he was. I just stared at the paper, feeling its weight press against my palm like it might carry the last words my son ever spoke. I didn't open the note right away. For a moment, I just stood there, surrounded by mourners who were now drifting back toward the church. Some glanced at me, some avoided eye contact entirely, but no one asked about the man in the black coat. It was as if they hadn't seen him at all. I looked down at the paper in my hand. My fingers trembled as I clutched it. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than words. Jonah walked up beside me. His voice was small. "Mom." "Who was that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I unfolded the note and my eyes caught the handwriting. Neat, slanted, unfamiliar. Just one sentence. That's all it took. Your son pushed his brother out of the car's path. My knees didn't give out this time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I froze. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the sounds around me. I read it again. The words didn't change. Elias had saved Jonah. In that split second, he saw the danger and made a choice. He acted. He sacrificed everything. It wasn't just an accident. It wasn't random. Elias had looked at his brother and chosen to give him a chance at life. Jonah reached for the paper in my hand, but I pulled it to my chest. "I need a minute," I said. He nodded, stepping back, his expression tight with confusion. I walked around the side of the church and sat down on the low stone ledge near the old oak tree. I read the note again and again, whispering the words aloud like a prayer. My son, the one people pitied, ignored, undervalued, had done the most extraordinary thing a person could do. He had given his life for someone else. The tears came then, but they were different. Not grief, not shame, not rage. It was something fierce, something proud, something full of light. He hadn't died for nothing. He hadn't been weak or forgettable. He had been brave. He had been selfless. He had been good. I wiped my face with my sleeve. My hands were still shaking, but there was a new steadiness in my chest. I stood up, folded the note carefully, and slipped it into my purse. Then I walked back toward the churchyard. Not fast, not in a rush, but with intention. When I got there, the priest was wrapping up. People had started to leave, murmuring to each other as they passed the fresh earth of Elias's grave. Aunt Marlene stood with Brielle, laughing softly with another relative, like they were waiting for a ride to lunch. I walked past them without saying a word. I went straight to the front of the crowd and asked the priest if I could say something. He hesitated, glanced at the time, but then stepped aside. I took his place. My voice was hoarse from crying, but it held. I looked out over the crowd. Family, friends, neighbors, people who had shown up to mourn my son, though some had barely known him. Some had spoken kindly. Others had judged, whispered, chosen their favorite long before tragedy forced them to pick. "I want you to know something," I said. "You've all heard a lot about my sons lately. You've heard how different they were. You've heard who was the favorite. You've heard who people think should still be here." A few heads turned. Marlene shifted on her feet. Brielle looked at her shoes. "But you didn't hear what happened that day. You didn't see it. Elias did. He saw the car, he saw Jonah on his bike, and without thinking he pushed him out of the way. He died saving his little brother." Silence fell. The wind stopped. Even the birds seemed to quiet. "I got a note today," I said, holding it up. It was from a stranger who witnessed everything. Elias chose Jonah's life over his own. That's who he was. That's who you buried today. I turned toward Marlene, then to Brielle. "So the next time you say God took the wrong child, remember this. Elias didn't just die. He saved a life. That is what goodness looks like. That is what real love looks like." I didn't wait for applause. I didn't need anyone to tell me it was powerful. I stepped down and walked back to Jonah, who was crying now, head bowed, shoulders shaking. He looked at me and whispered, "I didn't know." I took his face in my hands. He did, and that was enough for him. After I spoke, no one said a word. The silence hung there like a blanket, thick and heavy. People looked around at each other, unsure whether to move or stay. Even the ones who hadn't said anything cruel kept their heads low. Maybe they had thought it. Maybe they were ashamed of what they had assumed. I stood beside Jonah as they lowered Elias's casket into the ground. He held my hand so tight I could feel his fingers shaking. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw how young he still was. 14 years old, skinny, scared, carrying a weight far too big for his shoulders. After the final prayer, people began to drift away. One by one, they mumbled goodbyes, offered soft apologies, and walked back to their cars. Some avoided me completely. Others offered hollow words about how brave Elias had been, now that the truth was out in the open. Funny how quickly they changed their tone. Aunt Marlene approached. Her lips were pressed tight, the kind of expression someone wears when they've been caught saying something they can't take back. She looked at Jonah, then at me. Her voice was brittle. I didn't know. I didn't mean to upset you. We all loved him. She stopped talking when I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Brielle stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed, eyes red. She didn't speak either, just looked at Jonah, and then turned away. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need anything from them. What I needed was already buried in that ground. That night, after we got home, I sat with Jonah in the living room. The house felt impossibly quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, the kind that made you realize something was missing and it wasn't coming back. Jonah still hadn't eaten. He sat on the floor, his back against the couch, the note from the funeral clutched in his good hand. His eyes were puffy, his voice barely there when he finally spoke. I should have seen the car. I should have moved faster. It should have been me. I got down beside him and took the note from his hand, setting it gently on the coffee table. I looked at him, and for once, he didn't look like the kid who joked his way out of trouble. He looked like a boy who didn't know how to carry what had been handed to him. It's not your fault, I said. Elias didn't hesitate. He didn't make you choose. He chose for himself. Jonah's voice cracked. Why would he do that? Why didn't he yell at me to move? Because he loved you, I said. Because in that moment, he wasn't thinking about himself. He saw you in danger, and he acted. That's who he was. You have to believe that. Jonah started to cry. Real, raw, body-shaking sobs. I pulled him into my arms, and we stayed like that for a long time. No words, just grief, just love. Later, he stood up and walked to his room without saying anything. I stayed on the floor, staring at the folded note. I unfolded it again. The handwriting didn't belong to anyone I knew. There was no signature. Just that one sentence. Your son pushed his brother out of the car's path. I looked out the window into the dark. I didn't know who the man in the black coat was. I didn't know why he had waited until the funeral to come forward. But I believed him. With everything in me, I believed he was telling the truth, because it made sense. That was who Elias had always been, the one who gave more than he had, the one who thought of others before himself, the one who never needed to be seen to do something extraordinary. The next morning, I framed the note. I hung it by the front door, so every time we left the house, we would see it. Every time we came home, we would remember. Jonah didn't ask to go back to school right away. I didn't push him. But a few days later, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook open. He was writing. Not for school, for himself. When I asked what it was, he said, "A letter to Elias." I want to tell him I won't waste what he gave me. That was the moment I knew, the moment everything shifted. Elias was gone, but his love wasn't. It was alive in the boy he saved, and in me. A week after the funeral, Jonah and I visited the crash site. It was a quiet stretch of road just 2 blocks from the school, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you had to. The curve wasn't sharp, but the corner was blind. There were no skid marks. The driver wasn't drunk or distracted, just careless. A few seconds too fast, a few feet too far, and everything changed. Jonah stood at the edge of the sidewalk, his cast tucked against his chest. I watched him kneel in the grass. He pulled something from his hoodie pocket and placed it at the base of the nearest tree. It was a letter. Folded, sealed. He didn't say what it said, and I didn't ask. Some things are meant to be left between brothers. We stood there in silence. The wind moved gently through the leaves above us. For a moment, the world felt softer, like it was holding space for us to grieve. When we got home, Jonah taped a photo of Elias to the inside of his bedroom door. It was one I had taken on his last birthday. Elias was smiling, holding a chocolate cupcake, his face lit by candlelight. Jonah didn't say anything about it. He just nodded when I noticed. A few days later, he asked if he could join the science club Elias had been part of. Said he wanted to finish one of his brother's unfinished projects. It was a small thing, but it meant something. It meant he was choosing to live in a way that honored the boy who saved him. I started to heal, slowly. Not by forgetting, but by remembering with purpose. I went through Elias's things one drawer at a time. I kept the letters he wrote me, the books he loved, the sweatshirt that still smelled like him. I donated the rest to families who needed them, not because I wanted to let go, but because I knew he would want to help someone else. The man in the black coat never came forward again. I asked around. No one remembered seeing him. No one at the funeral knew who he was. For a while, I wondered if I had imagined him, like some kind of guardian sent to deliver the truth. But the note was real. His words were real. And that was all I needed. I framed the note and hung it by the door just as I had promised myself. Every morning, Jonah touches it before he leaves for school. It's become a quiet ritual, something between a blessing and a vow. People stopped whispering, or maybe they just got quieter about it. Either way, I no longer cared what they thought. They hadn't known Elias the way we did. They hadn't seen the small moments of grace he gave to the world, even when no one was watching. Now they knew how his story ended, but Jonah and we knew how he lived. One night, a few months later, Jonah and I were sitting on the back porch. The stars were out and the cicadas buzzed in the trees. He leaned back in his chair and looked up. "Do you think he was scared?" he asked. I looked at him, and for a second I saw the boy he used to be, the one who chased fireflies and made up songs about cereal. But I also saw the young man he was becoming. "No," I said. "I think he saw you and knew exactly what he had to do. I think he made peace with it before he even hit the ground." Jonah nodded. He didn't cry. He didn't speak again. He just sat with the truth of it. That's how grief lives with you, not always in loud moments or empty rooms, but in quiet understanding, in choosing to carry love forward, in remembering not just how someone died, but how they lived. Elias taught me that the world doesn't always reward the kind ones, the quiet ones, the ones who don't ask for attention, but they are the ones who hold it all together, the ones who love without needing to be seen. He gave his life for his brother, and in doing so, gave us both something we'll never let go of. So now, every morning, I tell myself what Elias showed me with his final act. The good ones aren't gone. They live in the choices we make, in the way we love, and in the people we choose to become. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If Elias's sacrifice moved you, if his quiet strength reminded you of someone in your life, please take a moment to honor him by liking this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear this kind of love still exists in the world. Leave a comment below. Tell me about the people in your life who show up quietly, who give without asking, who love deeply. I read every one of them, and if this kind of storytelling speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this, real, raw, and rooted in the things that matter, because some stories don't just deserve to be told, they deserve to be remembered. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.